Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Enable Handomatic Weekly Hangout. We've got a lot of exciting things to cover. We've got the recent enhancements to the application to change the measurements. Um, we've, uh, Joshi, want to talk about OpenJSCAD. We can discuss Handomatic and Enable Hand 2.0 and the conference that's coming up, and there are some maker fairs coming up. Um, and then how we can look at integrating that into it. So we'll need a little background on that. But first, let me start with the Handomatic, the changes that we made to the app. Let me just bring that up. So the big change is that we changed the measurements from before. You might remember we used the wrist width on the hand that needs the prosthetic and the length of the full hand. Now we're using the knuckle width of the full hand and the palm length of the full hand. So now the generated prosthetic will match that. So those are the two measurements that you put in, and then when you hit preview, it'll generate the graphic, and when you hit generate STL, it'll generate the STL. So the behavior aside from that is the same as before in terms of automatically generating the prosthetics from the measurements. It's just we're using different measurements because that was the strong guidance from the designer community. So thanks for that. And Ro did all the front end work. I did a little bit of back end work. So thanks, Ro. That's the first thing we wanted to show. Second thing, and not too much to show of it, is that we did set up a test tool. So inspired by the discussion last week on testing methodology, since our testing methodology was informal, to be generous. Our QA team is us. So what I did is I wrote a little script that runs the back end for every combination of the front end settings. So each piece, right, gauntlet, palm, proximal, distal on the finger and thumb, parametric or short gauntlet, Cyborg Beast or Creo Cyborg Beast finger, and the three different palm styles: Cyborg Beast with the thumb cut out. So no thumb actually means you have a thumb, so you don't need one on the prosthetic, or the Creo Cyborg Beast design. And then you can put in the measurements, and it generates every combination of everything to make sure all the combinations work, which, of course, found some bugs. So that was a very good idea from the people that were encouraging that. So thanks for pushing on that one. Any questions about that? I don't see any. Okay. So now I guess. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
So that doesn't provide a means of knowing whether the models are valid. It just generates a bunch of files, right?
Right. Yeah. So the script generates the files, and then I have to look at them and make sure that all the parts actually fit the way they're supposed to fit. So actually, what I do is so it generates all the different combinations. So it generates like 64 files, and then I take each set that's supposed to fit together and load them up into a slicer program, Simplify 3D. That happens to be what I use. And then I line them up and see that they all line up properly and all the pieces fit the way they're supposed to fit.
It's a beautiful thing.
So at the end of it, yeah, so I've got to eyeball it, but I really couldn't think of a way to automate looking at the geometry and making sure it looked right. But I've got to say, running the script and having kick out a bunch of files for 45 minutes or so, and then looking at it for a few minutes is much more efficient than what I was doing before, which was going through and clicking every combination. So rigorously going through all the combinations. It's a pretty simple script. It's up in GitHub. There's now a test directory with a test.sh shell script in it. So anybody who's sufficiently motivated can run their own test for all the combinations of everything.
One idea that I was thinking of when you were saying that is there a way we could build like a virtual test jig like we know where the hardware needs to be. Can we build a file that would align, like that's align on a pin or a set of virtual hardware, and then bring in the model and then align the models so that you can see that the things fit together somehow?
Yeah, so that's actually what's rendered when you say, I want to render the, here, I can bring it up. When you say that you want to see the assembled model, that's actually taking all the pieces and putting them together into one model. So, and if you render that, you can then
I think he's talking more from a testing point of view, Laird. Is there a way to use that as a validation test to check to see if this part still fits in this part as expected?
Yeah, that's precisely it. It's the equivalent of what I would call a first article test.
Sure. Yeah, I don't know how to do that with an output STL, but if you do, that would be awesome, because scripting it would be much better than doing it manually. I'm all for it. I just don't know how to do that. But
we can put that on.
You or anybody watching, that'd be an awesome idea.
Okay.
It might be possible to pull them into some more intelligent CAD tool and have some rules about intersections or something. I don't know. But yeah, intriguing idea.
So I have some ideas along that lines. After maybe we can take that offline and discuss it as part of a testing and validation discussion.
Yes, and also it would also be a good idea to put in the enable volunteer jobs section a request for someone to build what you're talking about, Shashi and Laird.
I love that we have a jobs board.
Yeah.
I didn't know that we had that. Fantastic.
Yeah, it's a category on the left side. Yeah, if you look on the left-hand side of the Google Plus group, it's one of the categories.
Excellent.
Ah, okay. Got it. So we're hopefully. Oh, I'll find it. Okay, so let's go to. Let me go look for that now. For everybody.
Just as an aside, I noticed that we have a fair number of people in the high-tech industry, and there's got to be, within the 1,500 people or so, some validation engineers that could take this on. I know my partner, Abhi, is in the group, and that's one of his specialties. So I can.
Oh, cool. Yeah, actually, now that you raise it, I can imagine doing something like writing an OpenSCAD script to say, load all the parts and do an intersection, and if there's anything returned from an intersection, that's bad.
Yep. I mean, that would be a first like part of a unit test.
Yeah, and obviously there could be more tests. That's just one that comes to mind. Cool. That's a great idea. Okay. So now, Shashi, did you want to show OpenJSCAD?
Yep. Let me just share it real quick here. Okay, so for those of you who may not be familiar, there's OpenSCAD.org, which gives us access to OpenSCAD in kind of a web UI and web interface. OpenJSCAD is a way of merging JavaScript with OpenSCAD, and what they're doing, what you're seeing here is most of the OpenSCAD functions, at least some of the important ones, written in JavaScript. So it's really simple to write a model or to build a model in here and then display it in any browser that supports WebGL, which is basically any modern browser. Like Safari supports this. I'm showing this in Chrome, and many others. So the cool thing is, if we were to output for example, one usage of this would be in Handomatic, showing a real rendered version of the file. I believe that if you output OpenSCAD format, you can show the rendering right here on the screen. The cool thing also is that it brings object-orientedness to the to OpenSCAD, so that you can more easily write unit tests. You can more easily write modules that can be reused over and over and over. And it's really simple for any front-end developer to use.
So Shashi, is the idea that this would allow us to then have an interactive 3D preview within the Handomatic? Is that where this is going?
So that's one usage for it. I could definitely see on the back end also, if we wanted to get models, run them through a validation test, we can write them in JavaScript and have that running on Node, for example.
I see.
It gives us access to many more programmers. Also, it's an advantage.
Shashi, does this interact with OpenSCAD running somewhere, or this replaces OpenSCAD on the server?
So that's a fantastic question. My understanding is that it uses OpenSCAD.org, and it's a JavaScript library for it. So I don't believe that we would have to use our own OpenSCAD running on our own server, but I haven't dived deep enough into it to check.
So OpenSCAD and OpenJSCAD are logically mapped. So there's actually an OpenSCAD to OpenJSCAD translator tool, for example. And certainly JavaScript is a more powerful language. I think the challenge, at least when I looked at OpenJSCAD a while ago, is that it was functionally kind of limited at the time, and it may not still be true, but you couldn't have STL files loading in and some of the more complex operations like that. But that may not be true now. It's certainly worth looking at.
So Laird, I'd seen this also a few months ago, and I looked at it yesterday, and if you look in the bottom left corner here, you can now take JSCAD, SCAD, AMF, and STLs and render them inside of this browser here. So they have interfaces for that. They said that 95% of the mapping is done, and which encompasses all of the common functions. So I'm guessing that the stuff that they don't have are the complex things like the Minkowski, for example.
Yeah, which let's hope nobody uses. So that would be interesting to look at for sure. And it might be interesting to take the current code and run it through the translator and see what pops out. I think the one thing is, since it runs in the browser and it's complex code, that might get a little slow, but we can try it. It's certainly a nice language, because OpenSCAD is a pretty primitive programming language. Great modeling, not a great programming language.
Yeah. So the thing that really excited me about this was that it's functioning. It can function on Node, and so we can build a very lightweight backend if needed. And then number two, since it's written in JavaScript, it opens us up to many more developers who are much more familiar with JavaScript. And it gives us object-orientedness in this as well. So it may give us the ability to write something more scalable. Although I'll let Ro and Alexander comment on that stuff.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, and plugging in Node.js.
I was going to say my only comment is it looks pretty awesome.
Yep. I mean, if somebody has the cycle to take the assembler pile of code and run it through this translator and see what pops out, that would be pretty exciting.
Sounds like another thing to add to the jobs list.
Okay, I am making lots of notes.
I'm going to go ahead and unshare that.
Nice, good find. John, do you want to talk about Handomatic and the super duper Enable conference coming up?
Introduce Jeremy to talk about it. The conference is coming up big, and we learned today that ABC News and CBS News are both going to be bringing film crews. So it's a big deal. Among the featured highlights of this event are the crowd pleaser. We're going to fit hands to kids. We're also going to be introducing Enable Hand 2.0, which Jeremy has been cat herding on, and conceivably it would be nice to, for example, unveil the fact that OpenHand 2.0 is supported by Handomatic, and the new version of Handomatic could also be showcased. I can't say that I know where on the program that would go, but we are going to be doing an evening unconference, which will include an academic poster session, which is one venue for this kind of thing, and I'm sure there'll be all sorts of show and tell. So I'm laying down the challenge if Jeremy thinks the timing might work.
So I think we could technically do it with the static model, not parametric, if that's ready with some lead time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that should be the case. We're planning to release those models for community testing on Monday, actually, and then we're hoping to have them pretty well, I don't want to say finalized, but at least in a stable form by the end of the week, so by the 5th of September, which is a Friday, which means that we would then be able to start having people printing parts for the conference starting the 6th. So that would give 2-3 weeks to get something into the app. Does that seem realistic, Laird?
Yeah, particularly if I can sync up with whoever's doing the modeling, because the time-consuming part is getting everything centered on 0, 0, 0 coordinates and knowing what all the scales are and stuff.
Right.
Which I had to reverse engineer for the current designs, but since they're all being actively modeled, it would be pretty easy for somebody to say, the origin is here and it's 55 millimeters across the width, or whatever.
So I heard you say that you want the origin to be at 0, 0. Are there other things, and could you maybe email me a list so I can be sure to communicate that in advance to everyone on the design team?
Sure. Yeah. It's really the if the 0, 0, 0 coordinate is in the middle of the back of whatever the part is. So the middle of the wrist, the middle of the knuckle. Sorry, the middle of the wrist is for the palm would be 0, 0, 0, and the middle of the all the other pieces, 0 would be kind of the middle of the hinge on the palm on the knuckle or the finger, because that makes it easy to line everything up.
So you want it to be in the center of the part, or sort of at the base in the center?
In the center of the joint, so the pivot point.
Ah, okay.
Because that's what I line up is all the pivot points. So I actually already, I kind of have this written up already as part of the Handomatic documentation, but I'll extract it.
Right. That's right. You have a section in there about how to prepare models for this, right?
Right. But I'll go look at it and I'll extract the bits that are kind of human friendly because it's in the middle of a big document.
That would be great. Just send me an email with that.
Yep.
Laird, it sounds as if a diagram of a typical hand with callouts pointing to just, I need to know the coordinates of this dot, this dot, this dot, and this dot might make your life much simpler and be something that the designers could do as part of a workflow of submitting a new model to Handomatic intake.
Yeah, I think a diagram's a great idea because that's all in a document on a wiki in words, which obviously isn't the ideal communication mechanism. So I will make a picture so that way people don't have to talk to me as much.
You might think about making a picture and then making a form or something that they can fill out in a manifest where they then hand you, if I understand it, a bunch of STL files, I guess, and the manifest. And then your work has gotten much, much easier. And you've put the burden on those who can do it much more easily.
No, I have a related question. Laird, if you're going to be doing that, I wonder if you might be able to help us with something else at the same time. As part of what we've been thinking about for the front end, we were thinking of presenting a kind of an image, sort of an exploded view diagram of a typical generic hand so that people could visually select the parts they want to make, even if they don't know the terms like proximal, distal, this, that, the other thing. So is that something that would be maybe a derivative of what you're making? Could you make us just a generic kind of exploded parts diagram?
Yeah, I could definitely make an exploded parts diagram. because there's already the assembly in the code, so that just means stretching it out a little bit.
Oh, that would be great.
Yeah, so that one's easy. So
Okay,
yeah,
great.
that sounds good.
So now, here's another question that's related to this: is if we do get this incorporated into the application, so what we're going to have is we're going to have a whole bunch of sizing information coming into us from all these people that are attending the conference that we need to get hands printed for.
Yep.
Peter Binkley has offered to help kind of centralize the process of analyzing those measurements. So
Nice.
he's going to go through all the photos and translate those into, we need this one at 125%, this one at 140%, etc. What I'm wondering is, in the simple mode of the app, we're right now asking for 2 measurements, which then correspond to scaling on the X and Y axes. Would it make sense to allow an alternate mode of using the app of just saying enter a percentage and allow equal scaling X and Y? In other words, the equivalent of how we've done it in the past. What do you think about giving people the alternative of almost a quick mode of just saying, I just want 150% print. I don't need it differently scaled on X and Y. I just need it 100. Either we would need to do that, or I need Peter to give us the 2 measurements instead of a percentage, I guess.
Got it. Well, so if you've got a percentage, you can just scale it in your slicing software normally.
That's right. I guess I'm just thinking that once we start doling out the print jobs to people, we're going to be having a bunch of different people printing. I don't know. I thought some of them might want to be able to use the app, and it might be nice to give them that option.
Yeah, no, we could. I mean, the thinking around the measurements is it's more customized for you. You know, like length and width are scaled independently.
But you're right. I guess as long as he gives me a percentage, I could, in the spreadsheet, I could very easily calculate out the 2 measurements based on the math and just give those to people too.
Yeah, well, except isn't he getting the measurements from the pictures to start with, and then so he's getting the measurements and figuring out a percentage?
Yeah, so I could just have him record the 2 measurements along with the percentage.
So if he is doing that, he might as well use the measurements.
That's true. Okay, so then why don't I have him record both? I can have him put in the R8 and R9 measurement as well as a percentage, and that way people can use either the app or the old method.
Yep. So the other thing is we'd really want to get the generated batch of files in one click working.
Yes.
Because otherwise you get to click a lot.
That's true.
And actually, it's very nearly what I wrote in the test script, but somebody would need to wire it up to the web interface.
Well, that sounds like a big deal. That's something that really wants to happen.
Yeah, it's huge user impact, but technically it's essentially running the test script, shell script from on the web server, and then sending an email or something.
Right. So I don't know that I can actually go through and complete the whole email thing, but if you want to send me the string, then I can give it a shot. Or at least give me the line number. I'll try to extract it, and then we'll see what we can do to activate email capabilities within the scope of what we've got deployed out there.
Yeah. So I'll tell you what. I've got the shell script right now that generates every combination of everything, and essentially I'll strip it down. But basically, it'll just be a shell script that says execute OpenSCAD 6 times, once for the palm, once for the gauntlet, once for the thumb, blah blah blah, right? And it'll kick out 4, 5, 6 files depending on the options that are picked. I can write that script, but somebody will have to call it from the PHP code.
Yeah, that's easy. I can do that.
Okay.
Well, so that's the real breakthrough that we'll unveil at the conference if it comes through. Handomatic existed, but let's face it, it was really a bit odd to have to click your way through every darn part. Everyone will appreciate the notion that you can now enter just 2 measurements, expect an email with all of the files ready for printing a few minutes later, or a half hour later. That's great.
Yeah, well, half an hour is generating 64 files because it's every combination of everything. We just have to generate 4, 5, 6 files.
Sure.
4 if there's no thumb, 6 if there is. And that's probably more like 10 minutes.
Right. So that's terrific. That's a big deal. Oh, I did notice one thing that I wanted to mention, and then I forgot. It's now down to 2 measurements, which I guess is all you need for the hand. Well, at some point, and this shouldn't be on the agenda now, but sometime soon we should talk about accommodating arms, where I think you really only need to start with just the distance from elbow to wrist, assuming they have an elbow.
Right.
And that becomes a third parameter, but let's just not put that on the agenda until after the 28th, I guess.
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand quite all the implications of that, but the architecture we came up with is extensible for things like that, so that's a pretty reasonable ask.
Okay.
We just have to figure out what the right math is.
Okay.
Very cool. So I think we sort of answered the what are we going to do with the Hand 2.0 with the Handomatic, which is we'll integrate them as static files, scaled the way we're doing the other static files. With the two, and everything else is pretty much the same. So it'll be it's a gauntlet, finger, and palm set of options, right?
Yeah, along with other details. So there's some differences that'll add the number of parts for you. For example, the tensioner mechanism is modular now. So there's a tensioning module that slides into the gauntlet. There's, of course, the tensioning pins. There's snap pins now, which replace the Chicago screw hardware. So you will have a couple of extra parts compared to the prior models.
Well, so in the tensioner, is that a new thing or is that a choice? Because if that's a choice, we'll need to add it to the UI.
Well, it's part of the gauntlet. It's just that it's not part of the same STL file. He has one STL for the gauntlet and then an STL for the tensioner module, which has a dovetail joint that slides into the gauntlet.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. So so what I can do is just make that when you get the printable STL, it might have two things joined in it next to each other as a plate.
Sure.
Something like that.
That's how he's doing it now, actually. Frankie has been working on the gauntlet, and he's got all the gauntlet-related parts wrapped up in one STL file on a build.
Got it. Yeah, so if he can... so for using them in the Handomatic, I'd want them as all separate files, but
Good.
I would probably pack them all together because otherwise we'd end up having to make more UI changes, and I don't want to make more work for Ro.
Well, the only thing you have to be careful about is I noticed that the way he had done it, he had packaged up the gauntlet and, like I said, the tensioner module and the snap pins and the tensioner pins all kind of next to each other, and so it ended up being kind of a square build. But it was such that when you scale it up past about 140, 150%, it actually wouldn't fit on a 6x9 build plate, no matter how you rotate it. So being able to split the parts up individually does actually become important in some cases.
So yeah, I mean, I'm fine generating them all independently. It just means making the pick list. Let me share that screen, but the.
Well, I mean, ideally, the pick list would just show, you know, the new Enable Hand 2.0 gauntlet as one option, but then it would generate, you know, half a dozen different parts for that gauntlet.
Yeah, oh, okay. So potentially we want to take away the gauntlet style, finger style, palm style stuff. And actually, come to think of it, we're not really using padding anymore because we're using the knuckle width and the palm length. So potentially it just comes down to generate a hand, put in left, right, and two measurements.
Now, why do you say we're not using padding anymore? Because when I measure across the knuckle, I still do add in the padding because you're going to have padding inside the palm area. So are we not adding the padding to the R8 measurement?
So I'm not adding the padding to the R8 measurements. I was adding it when we were using the wrist width because I was adding the padding to the wrist in order to have the inside of the gauntlet fit that. But now the scaling is based on the knuckle width. So the knuckles match the measured knuckle width, and then everything else is scaled relative to that.
Okay, and I guess
so the gauntlet width is the.
I want to make sure we're on the same page with this because if I measure across the palm and it's, let's just say it is 55 millimeters, I would normally, if I was doing this the old way, I would add 5 millimeters to that because in the palm area, you're going to have a wrapper of Velcro and you're going to have foam padding on the top that will take up extra room. So I just want to know, are we doing that differently here?
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I can change that. Right now, I'm literally taking, say, the 55. the screen, that's on the R8 measurement, say, and I'm literally just scaling the gauntlet to be, the palm, so that the knuckle block is 55 millimeters wide.
Okay.
So that it's the same.
I mean, I don't know if anyone else here has any thoughts on this, but I would do it with the padding. So if we had, again, to use my example, if I had a hand that was 55 millimeters across, I would then say 60 millimeters divided by 55, which would give me 109% scaling. And I see there that we're at 98% scaling at 55.
So, guys, I missed the discussion. Why are we thinking about removing the padding?
Well,
it's not removing it. It's not being used right now.
Yeah. So basically, right now, let me hold up. So if I put in a measurement of 55 millimeters knuckle width, I'm scaling this hand to be 55 millimeters from there to there.
Okay, yeah, so that won't give us enough room, though, Larry.
Whatever happens inside the hand is just scaled relative to that. So if that's not the right thing to do,
yeah, I don't think that is right. I think because the 55 millimeters is the space inside the hand there. So if we measured at 100% scale, the widest part inside the palm area is 55 millimeters across. That's where that measurement comes from.
R8 is the width of the full hand knuckle block.
Right.
Right. So the question is, what scale should the prosthetic hand be?
That's what I'm saying. So what you're supposed to do is take the measurement across the knuckle block, add 5 millimeters to that, and then divide that by 55 to get your scaling factor.
Sure. Wait. So add padding once or twice?
I've always added 5 millimeters once.
Sure. Okay. I can make that. That's easy.
So the product manager says that if we want that, we should be added in at some point. Just in my own experiments with it, if you add it twice, the hand fit is very loose.
Got it. Okay.
So you do it the same way, Shashi? You add the padding 5 millimeters once?
Yes.
Okay, great. So at least we have some.
That works for me. And what about length? Right now I'm just taking wrist to knuckle length and matching it.
I would do the same thing. I would add 5 millimeters there because you're going to have padding all around the palm.
Sure. Yeah. So is the hand? So are we assuming the hand width is pretty much to the knuckle? Because there's also the stuff inside the print, right? So.
Correct.
I'm kind of ignoring the fact that I don't actually know the shape of someone's hand.
So I'm assuming that the measurements we're dealing with all relate to the space inside the palm and not the palm itself. You see what I mean?
Yeah. So
if you're measuring to the outer part of the knuckles on the model, I think it should be to the inner part of the knuckles.
I'm actually scaling the distance from the middle of the wrist joint to the middle of the knuckle joint, which I thought was the definition.
I think maybe this is not even. Maybe this is too much of an intellectual exercise here. What matters really is that when somebody scales a hand the way we've always done it, so they print something at 140% scale. If we were to use the app and put in the equivalent of those same 40% measurements, we should get a hand that's exactly the same size. I think that's the bottom line.
Yeah. So the question is, what's the right math, right?
Yeah, so I'm going off of the Cyborg Beast instructions, the way those have been documented, which is to take the measurement across the knuckles and then add 5 millimeters and then divide by 55.
Got it. Okay, so and then same thing for length, you guys think?
Yeah, because we've never done length, so that's new. So I think it makes sense to apply the same methodology, to just add 5 millimeters and then divide by the 100%, sort of default length, whatever that is.
Great. Okay, that's easy. Cool.
And then I might, just as a test, I might go ahead and do a print at a, say 100 and whatever % scale, and then do the same one from the app, and we'll just see if they're coming out to the same scaling. I don't see why they wouldn't, but that'd be a good check. I just want to make sure that because some people are still going to do this the old way, and some people will use the app, and I want to make sure that we're getting apples to apples,
Yeah. But that does mean when somebody says, like R8 is 55, the knuckle block is going to be 60.
That's right.
And the length from the wrist to the knuckle joint is going to be 75 instead of 70, which is fine with me. I just want to make sure we're all
The point is, Laird, that the R measurements are measurements of the hand, and it's
Yep.
your job to produce measurements of the enclosure, which is larger than the hand.
Okay.
That's right.
Well, yeah, but it's for the other hand, right? So, but yeah,
but we're measuring.
Ah.
But remember, we're measuring across the knuckle block. We're not including any fingers in the measurement, so it should be equivalent for the other. It shouldn't be any different for the other hand. You know, assuming that they have, you know, the whole palm and are just missing fingers.
Yes.
That's not an assumption we can make.
Yeah.
Well, no, but they're not going to have extra fingers, Lydia, in most cases. I mean, it's going to be the same size or smaller in most cases.
Okay.
Got it. So, yeah, I mean, it seems like a pretty reasonable starting point. So I'll make that change. That's easy. You know, it just makes, you know, but I have a feeling this is just going to keep evolving as we get more feedback from people. So the size you'll get out should be, you know, if you put in the same measurements as what went in. Right now, if the measurement of the Cyborg Beast is 55 and 70 on the outside, then that's what it'll come out with afterwards, because it'll come out at 100% scale.
But that's, hold on, I'm not following you, Laird. Because what I'm saying is, if you measure your hand and it's 55 millimeters, we wouldn't generate 100% scale hand. We generate 109% scale hand because we have to add in the padding.
Yeah, sorry, right. So right now, the way it's coded, if the Cyborg Beast was 55 millimeters across and you put in R855, it would say 100%.
Okay.
When I measured it, I guess the Cyborg Beast that I've got was probably, I think it was 56 millimeters across.
Okay, and that's why you got the 98%.
Yeah. So it's like 1 millimeter different. But if what should happen is it actually gets scaled up so that the total is 60, that's fine. Then it would go to like 104% or whatever the number is. So all right, I'll make that change. Great. So
anyway, all of this was coming off of the discussion for the event. So the bottom line is we need to have a lot of people printing for the event, and at some point we'll need to decide whether we're comfortable having them use the web app for that, or whether we just tell them to do it the old-fashioned way.
I mean, basically, whenever the STL files from the Hand 2.0 are ready, I can incorporate them pretty quickly, particularly if they're already all lined up and scaled to known scales.
Okay.
Which I'll send you the document on that.
So later in the week, what's your availability like? Like, what days are going to be best for you to work on that? Because we're coming up on, like, Friday is when we're hoping to have the thing finalized.
Sure.
Is that something you might be able to do on Friday or on Saturday? Or what's going to work best?
I mean, if it's Friday afternoon is usually not bad at work. So if it's ready, you know, Friday midday, then I can take care of it by Friday end of day.
Okay, well, let's make that our goal, because then we could stick with our timeline of telling people that they can start printing on the 6th and potentially using the app too. So I'll keep in touch with you on that.
Now, the other side of that, though, is that this just implied a bunch of like changing menus and stuff like that in the UI, which is either Ro or Mike. I guess Ro.
Ro or Alex, yeah.
Or Alex, yep. And
I'm sorry, what changes in the UI were intended?
Well, we'd have to just add options for the Enable Hand 2.0 in the drop-downs.
I see.
By the way, I'm making that easier. I'm actually exporting all the options onto a JSON file, which will be able to, you know, be read externally. So that action item that we had assigned to Mike, I'm taking care of it. And then
beautiful.
This is part of the effort that we've been discussing, so that we could assist the community. Alex, you know, everybody else actually come on board and be able to assist faster. So, yeah, there's a lot of work that we're discussing, but this is going to be one of the first things that we take care of.
Yeah, because if that's externalized, then there's no code changes. It's just a config change.
Right.
Which is easy. You know, like if I add something to the back end, I can just add it to the JSON file, and then magic happens, right? So.
That's great.
Yeah. So actually, I'm wondering then maybe that should be in the backend repo, or maybe copied between the two?
Yeah, I don't know. We could store it anywhere. It doesn't
Yeah.
really matter, you know.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So yeah, that's terrific, because then it's not a code change to add models, which is great.
All right, so then, Laird, towards the end of the week, then I'll sync up with you and get you the STL files. Row, if we can do our best around that Friday time frame to try to work that into the front end, then I can immediately after that do a quick video tutorial and get people started using that, and that we have all ready to roll out on Saturday potentially.
Yep.
All right, sounds good.
Excellent. Great. So actually, are there a set of files, or can there be a set of files soon to wire up? Because what I can do is drop them all in, kind of make sure everything's set up, and then drop in new STL files when they're done.
Sure,
and
absolutely. I have them all in a. I have all of the latest files in a Google Shared Drive. They're not in a fully working state right now, but for your purposes, yeah, absolutely. I'll share that with you in a short while here.
But I have a.
Sorry, go ahead, John.
I think a useful order might be, Laird, you create you draft this intake submission manifest, right? The breakout diagram that includes the magic numbers and the instructions about how to zip up all of the STL files.
Right.
You give that recipe to Jeremy.
That's a good point, yeah.
And he uses it to give you the Enable 2.0 hand intake package.
That's
you
right.
then,
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, because they're not in that state that you want them in yet.
Right, exactly. So
So we've got, Laird, we've got our next hangout with that team is on Sunday evening. So if you're able to get me something anytime between now and Sunday, I'll bring it up with them.
Right, yeah, I'll send you something probably tomorrow. Because I've already got it written up on the wiki. I just want to pull it out and draw a picture.
Okay.
Because pictures probably are more effective than words. So
those are always nice.
Yep. So excellent.
That's great.
Thank you.
Okay.
For what it's worth, I've tried to take notes on the action items in this document here. You might want to just review it.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's all somewhere in the chat, so that probably could be more organized.
All right. Well, I'll let whoever.
So yeah, I gotta say, if the Handomatic stuff is going to be on the agenda of the conference, maybe that's enough of an excuse for me to go fly up there, and I should visit my sister anyway. She lives in Baltimore.
Laird, please.
Yeah, definitely.
Between the two, I think I might have to do it.
Excellent.
Cool. Awesome. Okay, that'd be fun to actually see some of you guys face to face. Actually, who's going to physically be there?
I'll be there.
Awesome.
Be there.
Alex is going to be there.
Very cool. Very cool.
There you go.
Well, it'd be fun to see you guys.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Was there anything else anybody wanted to talk about today?
I don't think so. Lydia, I did some note-taking here, but I assume that you're going to... I assume it's Lydia who then scavenges from the sidebar.
Lydia, you had a problem copying and pasting from the sidebar chat. Is that still an issue? Do you want me to grab that for you?
I'd appreciate it, yes.
Okay, doing that now.
Okay. Okay. Well, I guess we're done. We can hit the green button.
Oh, I've got some good news.
Yeah.
I'll call it semi-good news. I've got some version of a development environment set up, so I've got the app running on a VM. So Ro and I just met today, and he's going through some code refactoring, and after he kind of does some mods to the code, I'll be in a better position in a few days to actually start contributing. So I'm days from making commits. If that's something that we're going to look at.
Oh, that's awesome.
Well, this was a short and efficient meeting, but these sound like huge advances. I think it's great.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, guys. See you online, and we'll talk next week.